on a ground level and a community level, Australia could do more to understand where these youths and backgrounds are coming from.
According to Victoria's Crime Statistics Agency, crime has actually dropped about 9% in the last year.
Many of these young people feel locked out of society, so they're not coping well.
Youth and gang violence is perceived with a lack of understanding, and I think that lack of understanding, it's viewed in a negative way.
Role models are important for the development of any young person.
We fight because we do believe that we are part of this community.
I get on the train, I have to tell myself, look, make yourself small. Yeah. I don't want to make myself small.
Yeah. Make me rethink my place in Victoria and calling Victoria home.
So excited to have everybody here, and it's nice to meet everyone. I'm really excited that we've got all these amazing people who do amazing work in the communities, working with youth and really making a change. If we can start off by going around and just introducing ourselves. My name is Mo, and I'm a youth mentor, and I use music as a way to engage with the youth.
My name is Martha. I'm Tongan background, so from the Pacifica community, and I'm basically a youth leader.
My name is John Kuot. I am a South Sudanese youth advocate, as well. I call myself never leader yet. And I do various activities within the youth space across Melbourne Metropolitan.
My name is Leah, and I'm a mother and an educator, and I work with youth in music, and storytelling and poetry, and I really love the way that music brings it all together in such a joyful way.
I am Lizzy, South Sudanese, and also a youth advocate, passionate about social justice, and I've been blessed to be able to, just share my love with other people through my involvement in the community as well as through my work. So yeah, it's a blessing to be here.
Awesome. I'm so excited to have everybody here, and it's nice to meet everyone. I'm really excited that we've got all these amazing people who do amazing work in the communities, working with youth and really making a change. I'm really excited to have us all here and have a discussion around some of the issues that the youth and the community are facing. I thought it would be great to start off by discussing, I noticed that there's a common thread between cultural differences and the issues that we face in the communities. Like throughout history, especially migration here in Australia, you've seen the European migrants who arrived, and they've faced similar issues to then the Asian migrants who arrived, to then the Polynesians, and then the Africans, and so on and so forth. And you tend to see a common thread in terms of the issues that they face. I'm interested to know everyone's opinion and their experiences and what you've seen.
That the only time they feel safe as a group is when they're together. That is their safe space. And for us as a society, we look at that as a no-no. You see, that makes them even rebel more because they're caught between culture conflict. They're the only people in the middle where both their parents, who have predominantly grown up in different community or different countries, have a different culture and different way of life, have now expect them to be 100% of that, but then you have the new Australia who expect them to be 100% of this. And as a young person, you end up getting pulled apart. Then what they also do, then what will automatically kick in is the third culture principle, which I like to call third culture, is where I am across that because I feel I'm safer together with young people who understand both cultures but refuse to be 100% of both cultures. Because if you have lived here 10, 15 years, you'll be naive to think that you're still 100% of the other. Unfortunately, we have to learn to balance both cultures in our everyday life. Our brain develops a period of time where we become mentally agile and being able to switch. Our code switching ability become much more efficient, which both communities do not understand because you grew up predominantly in one culture. It's easy for you to be very linear in how you view the society. For us, it's impossible because then we have to learn to balance when we can be African, when we can be Aussie, That is our evidence. That's our survival mechanism. And that's why I see we are the only line of hope. As the first generation of migrants in this community, we are the only hope of saving these young people, because we understand that the barriers that both communities face, we are the bridge between both communities. And whether we like it or not, until that torch is passed to our kids, unfortunately, we're going to have to do the heavy lifting for the next, maybe let's say 2 decades minimum. And that is the reality. If you look for the Chinese who came here and built railroad, they had to do that. If you look at the Greeks, or if you look at the British, or if you look at the recent Vietnamese, they had to do that until they built an adequate social capital for them to be able to enter into the system. And mind you, there is also will be a degree that they, through the assimilation process, you become part of the Australia that look down on the next generation of migrants. And I'm very conscious of that. 20 years from now, what would I be saying about new migrants who are facing social challenges? Would I be the one who deport them all, or they're all criminals and thugs? There's a very high degree that number of members within my community who have gone through the same process would be saying that. As much as we unfortunately, it's part of Australia transforming you and assimilating how we welcome migrants to this country. Are we doing it right? Or are we doing it from a tokenistic perspective where we say, welcome, but you need to pay us back?
I think with the way that I do, the youth work is that, I grew up being really westernized, didn't know anything about culture. And I went through a journey of learning, getting mentored, and being a Pacifica woman, it was hard to take that leadership role to be able to speak out. Normally in our culture, we don't speak, the man speaks, and we do the on-ground work. So with that, so I started off my journey with visiting all the elders within the communities, speaking to them, doing a 6-week mentorship for them to be, okay, you can speak for our community. So I had to prove myself. So it took about 6 months for me to trial through all the ministers, all the elders around the community to say, I'm doing it the right way. I want you to say, I'm the right person to be able to speak out. I'm going to do this. And with that journey, the way I approach young people is that I want to get their respect, I try and earn their respect. So it starts off from a good conversation. Hey, let's go movies. I want to start taking those layers out, how's your journey, what's your life? And I always speak of experiences, I always speak of my experiences because that's what I know. With that, I always speak about with education, I didn't do youth work in uni, didn't go uni, I learned of, experiences and stuff, and I've been back to back with youth work, building programs, funding my own programs, until I learned how to write grants. So basically my journey is just trying to open up doors for these young people, for them to follow either into this journey or just raise awareness for our community. We call the Pacifica community as the community under the rug. And I always follow the proverb that my dad always taught me from when I started my journey was, the way to leadership is to serve. Serve your people first, and then you would lead them to success.
Do you feel like it's easier to achieve those goals if the participants are connected with the community, and how and what tools or exercises or approaches do you take to keep them connected with the community?
Yeah, so it's a bit hard, listening to the youth sometimes when it comes on social media and it's Pacifica kids, robbing, group of gangs, they start to drift away from being a Pacifica. They start to feel ashamed because that's what they feel at home. Once in our community, once you do a crime or once you've been put into juvenile centres, we don't want to know anything about it. That's hidden under, that's shame put on your family. So with that, so if they see that on media and stuff, they start to drift away from the churches, going to youth groups, singing, going to, community events. So with that, and that's part of my role is to communicate to the elders and try to bridge that barrier of what's happening now and what the young people are facing, and that we need to kind of take a step back and start serving our young people instead of just standing in the forefront saying, cool, you're ashamed, I'm embarrassed of you, your family is black marked in our culture.
I had the privilege of being raised by my grandmother, and so grandmothers have this calmness about them. They don't stress about what what you're wearing, where you're going. So I had this freedom from a very young age to really do whatever I wanted. But what was different was that freedom came with responsibility. And that was made very clear to me.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't restriction, but it was more about, I felt a sense of, so there was a relationship between me and my grandmother, and there was a trust. There was also accountability, where, you know, I knew that if I wanted to go out, I would communicate that so that she's not concerned. So I'm not always coming from a place of, you know, I'm worried my grandmother's not going to let me go, but it's more about letting her know she's not worried. And that really, and then when I hang out with my friends, so that's going back when I was, you know, a teenager, there was a lot of restrictions. You know, when I go to their houses, there was that assumption that I was a bad influence.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I just love wearing shorts. I don't know, I just want to show my great legs. So, I think when I saw that, I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand why sometimes parents, you know, think by limiting or by being restrictive, they're doing the right thing. Because unfortunately, reality is when you trust someone, they will do the right thing. But when you doubt them, you know, then there's that suspicion that they might end up doing the wrong thing. And so at 18, when I became my brother's guardian, you know, these were 3 teenage boys, it was very hard for me because, you know, I had to be a sister. I couldn't be a dad and a mum. I had to be what I was. And when I look back, obviously there was frustrations because boys, it was really difficult to get them to understand that I really loved them and that my concerns were for a reason. I wasn't just being annoying and I wanted to do what my grandmother did, which was to trust them and to show that my concerns were coming from a place of love and wanting the best for them. And I mean, it didn't work out back then. But, you know, looking back now, you know, my younger brother, who's now 22, it's incredible. You know, he became this man who just learned to become an adult on his own. And when I look at young people and who are struggling because of lack of role model, I really think that although sometimes we look at someone and we think they need someone else to, I think what young people do need really is that assurance that whatever they're going through, you're going to be there for them regardless.
I will be in a completely different position, different limelight. But these are the challenges that I have to go through, that now I have a responsibility then to educate my next generation. Hey, I did this, I went so far, but you could do this and probably you could do better if you learn from what I went through. And that become my whole work. That's what become our work. And that's what leads us into these spaces. If I was to walk up to somebody and say, majority of my career I was a banker, and I tell them I've started businesses, I've started tech companies, nobody would really believe me. But because I had that, where I sat in front of multi-billionaire investors and they go, mate, you have done so great for yourself. How you come so far? But yet, I'm not going to invest in your business because you're not the right person.
Even that alone is quite patronizing.
It's
quite insulting.
And I was saying, like, I used to be, you know, I used to sit in a very high position where I spend majority of my time in boardroom, talking to senior executives of some of the biggest companies. And I have to spend 30% of my time having to explain to them why my community or young people in my community are going through what they're going through. But I guarantee you, whenever I see a group of young white men do the same thing, I don't go and say, where's the community leader? When was the last time somebody called Scott Morrison and say, you're the community leader of this young Anglo man? It never happened. But for us, people want to find, I want to speak to the South Sudanese community leader, or I want to speak to the Pacific Islander community leader, and I want to speak to the, each and all of us are given community leaders, but nobody gives the Anglo community a community leader. They don't have one. There's nobody who they have to report to. We don't question whatever they do. It's fine. But everybody else have a sense of responsibility. There's somebody who has to account for what we do. You know, and that diminishes what the value we bring to the society. So we often undervalued regardless of what we bring. The fact that we can speak multiple languages is thrown out of the window. The fact that we probably could think, or have different degrees thrown out the window. Yeah. We have the highest population of educated people in Australia per capita. Nobody will ever talk about that. These are things which diminish our value that we bring to the society. Now people focus around, these people are always stuck on a dole. Like, no. They went and got your degree, same institutions as you went to Melbourne University. I got friends who are going to Harvard, Stanford, but they have to come and search for a job 2 years. I guarantee you, if you're Anglo kid, the minute you get enrolled, you don't even, a job will find you, first day of enrollment. That create classes, that create challenges, that create social barriers for each and every young person. And it frustrated me. That's why I said my goal for me in this society is to work with like-minded peers. Let's build organizations, let's build institutions, let's change the mindset of the next generation. And if it takes me a lifetime, I'm fine being it. If that is my last thing that I do, I'm fine being it.
Can I just add to that too? Because I think being here now, like 13.
I feel like this is a secret. I don't even know if I'm going to say it on camera, but I will. I think there is immense strength in us finding each other and in our communities looking out across, and not just to our communities, but for others. Like, something that gets lost in this conversation, it's really important that we talk about people of colour and sovereign people, but there is the underclass of white folk who get left behind as well. This is an economic structure, and they don't have, they know about community, because when you have nothing, you must rely on other people. They know about loyalty. Like the young people I work with, they talk about loyalty, they talk about ride or die, like they know what it means to need people. The way that but not quite the same like ancestry, like they're cut off from their ancestry. We're maybe a bit closer to that. But so there's all these different groups of people being marginalised and being left behind. And I think what is really powerful is what we're talking about is being mentors, and we're talking about struggling to sort of work with elders to try and change minds, and young folk to try and change minds. We're sort of sandwiched in this new generation. And I think that when we find each other, there is an underground. Like if a sister or a brother or someone that I consider to be like my people, they know, like we've spilled blood in a struggle that is similar, right? When they walk through the door, I'm like, what do you need? What can I get for you? Hit me up. We've got people everywhere. Let me tell what do you need?
That, to be honest.
And that is, you cannot mess with that.
That is powerful.
That's the connection.
And it's not structural, and we're not running all the businesses yet. And maybe the structure that I want to work my way up in doesn't even look like it looks like now. And I think that it serves us and it serves our communities and our young people to prepare them for something that we don't yet know, because technology is moving so quickly. I don't know the experience of being a teenager in 2018, because I'm not one, So I think we have to, like you were saying before, we have to trust young people and give them enough space, like give them enough loving boundaries to hold them, and enough space and oxygen for them to really step into what this future looks like. And we've got to keep having each other's backs, knowing that we're coming from these communities where there's so much intergenerational trauma and lived trauma that it's so easy for us to fall apart in each other's presence. We're just going to keep moving forward. Like a skill that is really important for us as well as teaching young people is that taking a moment to be like, hang on a second, come here. You come to me. Because I think we become accustomed to falling over ourselves to try and get opportunities or to try and get heard, or because we're coming from not very much. We want to be acceptable and liked, and it's like, hang on, you want something from me. Let's just don't spin this like you're doing something for me. It's such a colonized thing to go in and be like, I know what you do. You're like, hang on, you want to come to my people, or you want, and I think that's why it's really important, especially within music and arts. Like it is not okay to just have black and brown bodies on stages. You need black and brown bodies as managers, PR, executives, CEOs, because it's not enough for us to tell our story. We need to be very delicate with the way that we tell the story of telling the story. You know what I mean? We need to build safety around our people. What's important is succession planning. Like all the roles that I sit in now, I want to make myself relevant in the next 5 years so that a young person, or not even a young person, like someone who is not yet in that space without access to those positions, so they can sit in that, and I can go open some other doors tomorrow.
Exactly.
And I think like that's the power of different mentors from different communities and different experiences coming together, is like strategizing about how we do that. Like how do we prepare people for what we have to face? Like
We have to be our own keys.
I think
like,
people,
I'm tired, you know.
I think people get complacent as well,
Yeah.
and people get complacent and forget that, you know, like with what you're painting there is like, you know, the individual growth. You're constantly growing, and there's always something that you can pass back down, you know, or pass forward, you know. But coming back to, you got me thinking about the more kind of leaders and representatives that we have actually furthers community education, meaning that people can see a Polynesian person on TV or in a program and go in Parliament
CEOs.
and go, he's very similar, or that's what that is. I've heard that word, or you know, but without it, it's very hard for people, because Australia's a big place. And we're very. It's a big place, but when there's a huge space between us.
You know, that is the sense of belief. And for me, it breaks my heart. Just 2 planets away.
Yeah, exactly. So the fact that we're actually now getting together and talking about issues, it's something that we've never done. You know, we came from a community where what adult says is what goes. You know, your head is down, you take it. But these young people aren't my generation. I mean, I grew up in Sudan, and I came with that mentality where if someone older than me is talking to me, whether I disagree or not, out of respect, and that, I just go with it. But I know my sibling, who are younger than me, and my cousins who were all born here, don't have that mentality. And it's not out of respect, it's what they know. You know, we live in a culture here where you have to have a conversation. Like there needs to be a dialogue to come to an agreement or disagreement. But you cannot tell a kid, and that's it, because it will backfire, you know. So it's a good thing. Like, I feel it's a really great thing that we are now, instead of just being angry and being like, oh, community this and that, people take money and go away. I think we need to own it. There is a problem. Yeah, we have a lot of people in our community that use, you know, unfortunately, young people are being used, you know.
They are the product.
And so, and I'm happy that they're now owning it. They're now saying, you know what, you're not going to continue to use us. Let's talk. You know, let's make something happen. And I just recently heard that the Sudanese girls, because, you know, for us it's different, because being a Sudanese girl, growing up here, there isn't much program out there for me. You know, with the Sudanese boys, you know, you get them into sport. You know, they have a lot of opportunities out there. But for me, it's a whole. You know, I'm expected to be at home, cooking at home. You know, you're always expected to look after other people. But who's looking after you? That's something that is, I feel, for young girls that are growing up here, it's the reason why they're frustrated. It will help our parents change their mind around how they, you know, their expectation and even their treatment. You know, because I think with our parents, it's going to take a while. I think I might, maybe when I'm a parent someday, might still have a little bit of African mentality there, but it won't be as much as our parents right now.
The biggest mistake that all of us make is conflate ethnicity with culture. They're completely two separate things. Just because you're black doesn't mean that culture is based on your social surroundings, your social conditioning. It has nothing to do with race or color. But there's this sense of belief that because you're black, you're automatically African. I've had or because you're automatically Pacific Islander or indigenous. But it's based on your social conditioning. Until we learn to understand the social conditioning of individual, we will continuously still have a problem with cultural stereotype where we only call cultures based on color schemes.
Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately.
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Our voice is our voice for change.